They told me grief comes in waves. They said eventually the tide goes out and you learn to breathe again. But for Sarah Miller, the tide never went out. It just froze, trapping her in a permanent winter. It was a Tuesday, November 14th. Sarah remembered the date not because it was marked on a calendar, but because it was the last day the sun truly shone in her life. Mark, her husband of 4 years, had kissed her forehead at the door of their small, cozy cottage in Oregon. "I'll be back before dinner," he had promised, "and I'm bringing the good ice cream, the one with the cookie dough." He was going for a job interview across state lines, a construction gig that was supposed to pay enough to finally fix the leaking roof, and maybe, just maybe, start a college fund for Leo, who was barely 2 years old then. Mark drove away in his rusted pickup truck, waving until he turned the corner. That was 5 years ago. The police found the truck 3 days later. It was at the bottom of a ravine, twisted metal wrapped around an old oak tree. The driver's side door was torn open. There was blood on the seat, Mark's blood type, but there was no body. "The river was high that night, Mrs. Miller," the sheriff had said, removing his hat. "The current likely took him." They searched for weeks. Sarah searched for months. She walked the riverbanks until her shoes fell apart. She put up flyers until the staples blistered her thumbs. She screamed his name into the forest until her voice broke. Eventually, everyone stopped looking. Everyone except her. Now, 5 years later, Sarah sat on the edge of a twin bed in a cramped apartment in Seattle. The cottage was long gone, sold to pay debts. The dreams were gone too. "Mum," a sleepy voice whispered. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly and turned. Leo, now 7, was rubbing his eyes. He had Mark's messy hair and Mark's kind eyes. Looking at him was like looking at a ghost. "I'm awake, baby," Sarah said, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Just getting ready for work." "Do you have to go to the big glass building today?" Leo asked, sitting up. "I do. That big glass building pays for our dinosaur nuggets and the heating bill," she teased gently, smoothing his hair. "Mrs. Gable is next door. You go there after school, okay?" Leo nodded, but then he asked the question he asked every year on this specific day. "Do you think Dad is looking for us too?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "If he's out there, Leo, if he's anywhere, I know he's looking, he would never stop." But deep down, a darker voice whispered, "He's gone, Sarah. He's dead. You're chasing shadows." She kissed Leo goodbye and stepped out into the grey morning rain. She wasn't Sarah Miller, the beloved wife, anymore. She was employee 492 at Prestige Cleaning Services, and today she was assigned to the top floors of the Vanguard Tower. She didn't know it yet, but the ghost she had been chasing for 5 years was waiting on the 50th floor. But he wasn't Mark anymore, and he didn't remember her name. The Vanguard Tower was a monument to wealth, steel, glass, and intimidation towering over the city. Sarah hated it. She hated how her worn-out sneakers squeaked on the polished marble lobby. She hated how the men in expensive suits looked right through her as if she were part of the furniture. "Miller," the supervisor, a stout man named Mr. Henderson, barked. "You're late. 2 minutes." "Sorry, Mr. Henderson. The bus broke down," Sarah mumbled, grabbing her cleaning cart. "I don't pay you for excuses. You're on the executive floor today. Someone called in sick." Sarah froze. The executive floor, the penthouse, cleaning crews whispered about it. It was the domain of the CEO, a man shrouded in mystery. They said he took over the company 5 years ago and turned it into a global empire. They said he was cold, ruthless, and brilliant. They called him the Iron Wolf. "Make sure you're invisible," Henderson warned. "Mr. Blackwood hates distractions. If he even sees you, you're fired." "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah repeated. The name meant nothing to her. She took the service elevator up. 10 floors, 20, 30, 50. The doors opened to a different world. The air smelled of cedar and expensive cologne. The carpets were thick enough to swallow sound. The art on the walls was original. Sarah kept her head down. Invisible. Be invisible. She started polishing the long mahogany conference table in the main boardroom. Humming a lullaby she used to sing to Leo, a song Mark had written for them, she worked rhythmically. Sleep now, little bear, the moon is awake. Suddenly, the heavy double doors swung open. Voices boomed, loud, confident voices. "The merger needs to happen by Friday or we walk," a woman's voice shouted, sharp, demanding. "Relax, Elena, they have no leverage," a deep, baritone voice replied. Sarah dropped her polishing rag. That voice. It wasn't possible. That voice belonged to a dead man. That voice belonged to lazy Sunday mornings and bedtime stories. Heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, Sarah slowly lifted her head from under the table. A group of executives walked in. Leading them was a tall man in a charcoal grey suit that fit him like armor. He had broad shoulders. He walked with a predator's grace. He turned to face the window, catching the light. Sarah gasped. A sound so loud in the quiet room that it sounded like a gunshot. The man turned. It was him. The jawline was sharper. The hair was cut in a severe modern style. He looked older, harder. But those eyes, those whiskey-colored eyes with the flecks of green. It was Mark. Her Mark. For a moment, time didn't just stop. It shattered. Sarah stood up, trembling, her hands covered in furniture polish. She took a step forward, forgetting the rules, forgetting her job. "Mark," she whispered. The executives went silent. The woman next to him, a stunning blonde with eyes like ice, glared at Sarah. But the man, the CEO, he just looked at her. There was no recognition, no love, no spark. He looked at her with the cool detachment of a man looking at a stain on his carpet. "Excuse me," he said. His tone was polite, but freezing. "Who allowed housekeeping in during a session?" Sarah felt her knees give way. "Mark, it's me. It's Sarah." She took another step, reaching out. "You're alive! Oh my God, you're alive!" The blonde woman stepped in front of him, blocking Sarah's view. "Security!" she barked. "Get this crazy woman out of here." "Wait," the man said. He stepped around the woman and looked closely at Sarah. Sarah's heart soared with hope. He remembers. He has to. "My name is Julian Blackwood," he said slowly, enunciating as if speaking to a child. "I don't know who Mark is, but you are clearly mistaken, and you are trespassing." "No," Sarah sobbed, tears blurring her vision. "Look at me. It's Sarah. We have a son, Leo. He asks for you every day." At the mention of a son, a flicker of something passed through Julian Blackwood's eyes. A headache, a shadow of a memory. He winced slightly, touching his temple. But before he could speak, two security guards grabbed Sarah by the arms. "Mark, please, look at me!" she screamed as they dragged her backward. "Get her out," Julian Blackwood said, turning his back, "and make sure she never enters this building again." The heavy doors slammed shut, and Sarah was left screaming for a husband who was standing right there, but was somehow a million miles away. Sarah was thrown out onto the sidewalk. Literally. It was raining again. She sat on the cold concrete, her cleaning uniform soaked, sobbing until her chest hurt. Passers-by looked at her with pity or disgust, walking around the crying woman. "It was him," she whispered to the wet pavement. "I know it was him." She wasn't crazy. She knew every inch of Mark's face. She knew the way his left eyebrow arched when he was skeptical. She saw Julian Blackwood do exactly that when the guards grabbed her, but he was rich. He was Julian Blackwood, a CEO. Mark was a construction worker who loved cheap beer and fixing old radios. How? How could a man change his entire identity? Unless... Amnesia. Sarah said aloud. She remembered the accident, the ravine. The police said he might have hit his head, if he washed up somewhere, if he woke up with no name, and someone found him. She stood up. Her sadness was hardening into something else, something stronger, determination. "I am not losing him again," she vowed, "not when he's breathing." Sarah went home, but she didn't tell Leo. How could she? Daddy is alive, but he thinks he's a billionaire prince who hates us. Instead, she spent the night researching. Julian Blackwood, surfaced 5 years ago in Europe. Adopted, taken in by the dying patriarch of the Blackwood dynasty, Arthur Blackwood, who claimed Julian was his estranged, illegitimate son. Arthur had died 2 years ago, leaving everything to Julian. The timeline matched perfectly. Mark disappeared. Julian appeared 3 months later in Switzerland, and then she saw her, the blonde woman, Elena Vance, CFO of Vanguard, Julian's fiancée. The article described them as the power couple of the century. Sarah looked at Elena's photo. The woman was beautiful, sharp, and looked like she would eat glass for breakfast. "You're the gatekeeper," Sarah murmured. "You know, you have to know." The next morning, Sarah didn't go back to prestige cleaning. She was fired anyway. She went to Vanguard Tower, not as a cleaner, but as an applicant. She knew from the gossip that the catering staff was managed by a different agency, one that didn't talk to the cleaning agency. She applied for a dishwasher position. It was the lowest of the low, the basement of the empire. But dishwashers had access to the service elevators, and service elevators went to the penthouse. It took 3 days to get hired, 3 days of eating ramen and counting pennies. On her first shift, she waited. She watched the patterns. She learned that Julian Blackwood ordered a specific herbal tea at 3 p.m. every day. She learned that his fiancée, Elena, was abusive to the staff, yelling if the coffee was 1 degree too cold. And she learned that Julian was miserable. She saw him once from behind a kitchen door. He was standing on the balcony, staring at the city, looking lost. He didn't look like a man who had everything. He looked like a man who was missing something he couldn't name. The opportunity came on a Thursday. The regular girl who delivered the tea was sick. The manager was frantic. "Miller, you have a clean shirt?" the manager yelled. "Yes, sir," Sarah lied. She quickly buttoned her uniform to hide the stain. "Take this tray to the penthouse. Don't speak. Don't look at him. Put it down and leave. If you mess this up, you're dead." Sarah took the silver tray. Her hands were shaking so hard the china rattled. "I'm coming, Mark," she whispered. The elevator ride felt like ascending to heaven and hell at the same time. When the doors opened, the office was quiet. Elena wasn't there. Julian was at his desk, buried in paperwork. He was wearing reading glasses. Mark never wore glasses. Sarah walked in, invisible, be invisible. She placed the tray on the corner of his desk. She should have left. She should have walked away. But she saw his hand resting on the desk. On his wrist, partially covered by the expensive watch, was a tiny, faded birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon. Sarah stopped breathing. She remembered kissing that birthmark. She remembered Leo touching it when he was a baby. It was the proof. "Is there something else?" Julian asked, not looking up. Sarah couldn't help herself. "Do you still take it with 2 sugars and a drop of honey?" she asked softly. Julian froze. His pen stopped moving. That was Mark's secret recipe, a weird habit he picked up from his grandmother. Julian Blackwood, the billionaire, slowly took off his glasses and looked up. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her. "Who told you that?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Did Elena tell you to ask that?" "No one told me," Sarah said, her voice trembling but brave. "I know because you used to make it for me on rainy Sunday mornings." Julian stood up. He walked around the desk, towering over her. He was intimidating, powerful, but Sarah didn't back down. "Who are you?" he demanded. Why do you keep appearing? Why do you look at me like you know me? Because I do know you, better than you know yourself. He grabbed her arm, not violently, but desperately. A flash of pain crossed his face. He closed his eyes, swaying slightly. I have dreams, he muttered, almost to himself. A cottage, rain, a woman singing. No, sleep now, little bear, Sarah sang softly. The lullaby. Julian's eyes snapped open. Shock, pure, unadulterated shock. Stop it, he gasped, backing away. Stop playing games. It's not a game, Mark. I'm your wife. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, the elevator dinged. Julian, darling, I have the wedding samples. Eleanor walked in. She stopped dead when she saw Sarah. Her eyes narrowed. She recognized the crazy cleaner. And in that moment, Sarah saw it. She saw the fear in Elena's eyes. Eleanor knew. She absolutely knew who Sarah was. What is this trash doing here? Elena screeched, dropping her facade of elegance. I told security to ban her. Julian looked between the two women, confused, in pain. She brought the tea, Julian said, sounding unsure. She's a stalker, Julian. She's dangerous. Elena marched over and grabbed Sarah. Get out before I have you arrested for harassment. Sarah looked at Julian one last time. Check your chest, Mark, she said quickly as Elena shoved her toward the door. What? Julian asked. The scar. Above your heart. Check the scar. Elena slammed the elevator button and pushed Sarah inside. As the doors closed, Sarah saw Julian unbuttoning his shirt collar, his hand moving to his chest, and she saw Elena turning to him, her face a mask of panic. The war had begun. Sarah was fired again. Of course she was. But this time, she didn't leave the building's perimeter. She waited across the street. She knew she had planted a seed. Julian Blackwood was a man of logic. If he found an anomaly, he would investigate. Up in the penthouse, the atmosphere was suffocating. Julian stood in front of the bathroom mirror, shirt open. There, just above his heart, was a jagged, ugly scar. He had always been told it was from the skiing accident in the Alps, the same accident that took his memory 5 years ago. Arthur Blackwood, his father, had told him that. Elena had confirmed it. You were reckless, Julian. You hit a rock. It's a miracle you survived. But the woman, Sarah, she knew about it. How could a crazy stalker know about a scar he kept hidden under bespoke suits? Julian. Elena knocked on the door. Are you okay? Don't let that lunatic upset you. Julian buttoned his shirt quickly. He stared at his reflection. The man in the mirror looked powerful, rich, successful. But his eyes, they looked like strangers. I'm fine, Eleanor, he lied. He walked out. I need some air. I'm going for a drive. I'll come with you, Elena said instantly, grabbing her coat. She never let him out of her sight. No, Julian said firmly. Alone. Elena stopped, stunned. He never defied her. Julian grabbed his keys and left. Down on the street, Sarah saw the black Aston Martin pull out of the private garage. She didn't have a car. She didn't have money for a taxi. But she saw where he turned. He wasn't going to the country club. He wasn't going to the Hamptons. He was turning toward the old industrial district, the docks. Why? Sarah ran. She ran to the subway. If she guessed right, his subconscious was driving him. Before Mark disappeared, he loved watching the ships. He said it made him feel free. If Julian was feeling trapped, Mark might be trying to breathe. 30 minutes later, Sarah arrived at Pier 9. It was deserted. The grey water lapped against the wood, and there he was. Julian Blackwood, the billionaire, was sitting on a rusted bollard, his expensive shoes resting in a puddle. He was holding his head in his hands. Sarah approached slowly. She didn't want to startle him. It smells like salt and diesel, she said softly. You used to say it smelled like adventure. Julian didn't jump. He just lifted his head. How do you know about the scar? he asked. His voice was broken. Sarah sat down next to him, not touching him, just being near. 5 years ago, you saved a puppy from a barbed wire fence, she told him. You cut your chest open. I stitched it up for you on our kitchen table because we couldn't afford the ER. You drank whiskey for the pain and told me jokes to keep me from crying. Julian stared at her. He tried to reconcile this story with the skiing accident. I don't remember, he whispered. I try, but it's just black. That's okay, Sarah said gently. I remember for both of us. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn, laminated photo. It was them, laughing. Mark covered in paint, Sarah pregnant with Leo. Julian took the photo. His hands that signed million-dollar contracts, shook violently. He looked at the man in the photo. It was him, without the suit, without the coldness, and the smile. It was a smile he hadn't felt in 5 years. Who is this? He pointed to the baby bump. That's Leo. He's 7 now. He waits for you every night. A tear, a single hot tear, rolled down Julian's cheek. I have a son, he breathed. You have a family, Mark. We've been waiting. He looked at her. The barrier was cracking. I don't know if I'm Mark, he said. I'm Julian. I have a company. I have responsibilities. I'm marrying Elena in 2 weeks. Elena is lying to you, Sarah said firmly. She knows. Julian looked away. Elena saved me. When I woke up in the hospital in Zurich, she was there. She nursed me back to health. Or she kept you hidden until you believed her version of the truth. Suddenly the sound of screeching tires broke the moment. A black SUV pulled up. Security. Elena jumped out. She wasn't perfectly composed this time. She looked frantic. Julian, thank God! She ran over, shooting a look of pure venom at Sarah. Get away from him, Eleanor screamed at Sarah. I was just showing him the truth, Sarah said, standing up. You're poisoning him. Eleanor grabbed Julian's arm. Julian, come home. The doctor said your episodes would get worse. This woman is feeding your delusions. Julian looked at the photo in his hand, then at Elena, then at Sarah. She has a photo, Elena, of me. Elena laughed, but it sounded hysterical. Photoshop! AI! These people want your money, Julian. They research you and create fake lives. She snatched the photo from his hand and ripped it in half. No! Sarah lunged, but the bodyguards held her back. Take him to the car, Elena ordered the guards. I can walk, Julian snapped, pulling away. He looked at the torn pieces of the photo on the wet ground. He looked at Sarah, who was being held back, crying. He didn't run to her. He wasn't ready yet. The brainwashing was deep, but he bent down, picked up the torn pieces of the photo, and put them in his pocket. We're leaving, Julian said to Eleanor, but don't you ever touch her again. He got into the SUV. Sarah watched them drive away. She was bruised, wet, and heartbroken, but she smiled through her tears. Because he kept the photo, he was coming back. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, a suffocating, heavy silence. Elena stared out the window, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone, likely texting her lawyers or her security team to clean up the mess. Julian, or Mark as the woman had called him, sat like a statue, but inside his mind was a storm. He could feel the jagged edges of the torn photo in his pocket burning against his leg. She's mentally unstable, Julian, Elena said suddenly, breaking the silence as they entered the private elevator. I've already called the police commissioner. If she approaches you again, she goes to jail. Julian didn't look at her. Why are you so afraid of a cleaner, Elena? Elena flinched. I'm not afraid. I'm protective. You're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. You're a target. She knew about the scar, Julian said quietly. She knew about the honey in the tea. Oh, her lucky guesses. Or she bribed a doctor. These people are predators. Julian stepped out of the elevator and walked straight to his study. I'm tired. I don't want to be disturbed. He locked the door. It was the first time in 5 years he had locked Elena out. He sat at his desk and pulled out the 2 halves of the photo. He placed them together on the mahogany surface. The image was undeniable. It wasn't Photoshop. It was old. It was worn. The man in the photo was laughing. He looked lighter, happier. He looked loved. And the woman, Sarah, she was looking at him not with dollar signs in her eyes, but with adoration. Julian opened his laptop. He didn't use the company server. He didn't trust it anymore. He tethered his connection to a burner phone he kept for emergencies. He typed, Mark Miller, missing persons, Oregon. He hit enter. Thousands of results, but one stood out. An old news article from 5 years ago. Search called off for local father. Truck found in ravine. He clicked the image. There it was. His face. A younger, rougher version of his face. Mark Miller, 29, construction worker, presumed dead. Leaves behind wife Sarah and 2-year-old son Leo. Julian sat back, his breath shaking. He looked at the date of the accident. November 14th. He looked at his medical records from the Swiss clinic where he woke up. Admission date, November 17th. 3 days. You lied to me, he whispered to the empty room. For 5 years, you stole my life. He felt a rage building in his chest, hot and volcanic. But he was the Iron Wolf now. He couldn't just scream. He needed to be strategic. He needed to see the boy. If seeing Sarah had cracked the wall of his memory, seeing his son might break it down completely, but he couldn't go alone. Elena had eyes everywhere. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A private investigator who owed him a favor. Vince, I need a ghost protocol. Tonight, I need to disappear for 2 hours. Can you make it happen? That night, while Elena slept, or pretended to sleep, Julian slipped out through the service entrance, wearing a maintenance uniform. He wasn't the billionaire CEO. He was a father looking for the truth. The address from the police report led him to a run-down apartment complex on the edge of the city. Julian parked the nondescript sedan down the street. The rain was relentless. He looked up at the building, peeling paint, bars on the windows. Guilt washed over him. While he slept on 1,000 thread-count sheets, his wife and child were living here. He walked up the stairs, 3rd floor, apartment 3B. He raised his hand to knock, but hesitated. What would he say? Hi, I think I'm your dead dad? Before he could knock, the door opened. A small boy stood there, wearing dinosaur pajamas and holding a plastic trash bag. Leo. Julian felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The boy was a miniature version of himself, the same messy hair, the same eyes. Leo looked up, startled. He dropped the trash bag. Mom said I shouldn't open the door for strangers, the boy said, trying to sound brave. Julian knelt down so he was eye level with the child. I'm not a stranger, Leo, he said, his voice trembling. Leo tilted his head. He squinted. Then his eyes went wide. He reached into his pajama pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled object. It was a watch, an old, cheap, digital watch. Mom said you'd come back when the timer went off, Leo whispered, but the battery died a long time ago. Julian reached out and touched the watch. A memory flashed, blindingly bright, putting the watch on a toddler's wrist. Time me, buddy. Daddy will be back before the beep. I'm sorry I'm late, Julian choked out, tears spilling over. I'm so sorry. Daddy? Leo asked, his voice cracking. Yes, it's me. Leo didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask for a DNA test. He launched himself into Julian's arms. Julian caught him, burying his face in the boy's neck. The smell of milk and soap triggered something primal in his brain. The wall didn't just crack, it exploded. Flashes, teaching Leo to walk. Sarah laughing in the kitchen. The truck spinning out of control on the ice. The cold water. Mark! Sarah was standing in the hallway, holding a laundry basket. She dropped it. Julian stood up, holding Leo tight in his arms. He looked at Sarah. This time, there was no confusion, no coldness. "Sarah," he said, and the way he said her name, it was a caress. She ran to him. He wrapped his free arm around her, pulling them both into a crushing embrace. For 5 minutes, they just stood there in the hallway of a cheap apartment building, a tangled mess of tears and relief. "You remember," Sarah sobbed into his shoulder. "Not everything," he admitted, "but I remember how much I love you. I remember I belong here." He pulled back, looking at the dingy walls. "Pack your bags." "What?" Sarah asked, wiping her eyes. "We're leaving. Tonight. I'm not leaving you here another second." "But, Eleanor, the company." "To hell with the company," Julian growled. "I have money in offshore accounts she can't touch. We'll go to a hotel, a safe one." "Daddy, are you rich now?" Leo asked, eyeing Julian's watch. Julian laughed, a wet, emotional sound. "Yes, Leo, but not because of the money, because I found you." They went inside to pack. Julian watched them, a protective shadow. But he made a mistake. He had left his burner phone in the car, and in his pocket, his primary phone, the one Elena tracked, buzzed silently. He thought he had turned it off, but remote activation was a feature of Vanguard security. Elena was listening, and she wasn't just listening, she was already on her way. And she wasn't coming alone. "We're ready," Sarah said, holding a single suitcase. It contained everything they owned. Julian took the bag. He held Leo's hand. "Let's go." They opened the apartment door and found the hallway blocked. 4 large men in tactical gear stood there, and behind them, Elena. She looked impeccable, as always, but her eyes were manic. "Going somewhere, Julian?" she asked, her voice light, conversational. Julian shoved Sarah and Leo behind him. His body became a shield. "Get out of my way, Elena. It's over. I know who I am." "You are Julian Blackwood," she snapped. "You are having a psychotic break. The doctor warned us about this." She gestured to the men. "Restrain him. Sedate him if necessary. He's a danger to himself." "Don't touch him," Sarah screamed, stepping forward. "Grab the woman and the brat too," Elena ordered coldly. "No witnesses." "Elena," Julian roared, "if you touch them, I will kill you, I swear it." "You won't remember any of this in the morning, darling," she smiled. "We'll up your dosage. You'll wake up in Zurich, and this will all just be a bad dream." The men lunged. Julian fought like a demon. He was the Iron Wolf for a reason. He broke the first man's nose with a precise elbow strike. He kicked the second man in the knee, shattering it, but there were too many, and they had tasers. The crackle of electricity filled the air. Julian convulsed and fell to his knees. "Daddy!" Leo screamed. "No!" Sarah threw herself over Julian's body. One of the guards grabbed Leo by the back of his shirt, lifting him off the ground. "Let him go!" Julian groaned, trying to fight through the paralysis of the taser. Elena walked over to Julian. She crouched down, her expensive heels avoiding the dirty floor. She pulled a syringe from her purse. "I made you a king, Mark," she whispered in his ear. "I found you in that hospital, a broken nobody with no memory. I gave you a name. I gave you an empire. And this is how you repay me." "You stole my family," he spat. "I gave you a better life," she hissed. "But if you want to be a peasant so badly, maybe I should just let you die like one." She looked at the guard holding Leo. "Take the woman and the boy to the warehouse. Get rid of them. Make it look like a gas leak accident." "No!" Julian surged up, adrenaline overcoming the shock. He headbutted Elena. Hard. She screamed, clutching her bleeding nose, dropping the syringe. "Kill them!" she shrieked. "Kill them all!" The guard raised his gun toward Leo. Time slowed down. Julian saw the gun. He saw his son's terrified face, and the last lock in his mind broke. He wasn't just Mark the construction worker, and he wasn't just Julian the CEO. He was a father, and a father protects his own. He grabbed the syringe from the floor and jammed it into the leg of the guard holding him. The guard collapsed instantly. Julian grabbed the taser from the fallen man's belt. He spun around and fired. The probes hit the man holding Leo. The man dropped Leo. Leo scrambled to Sarah. Only one guard left. He aimed at Julian, but sirens began to wail outside, loud, close. "Police! Drop your weapons!" Julian's private investigator hadn't just arranged a car. He had called the cavalry. The hallway was filled with uniformed officers. Elena stood frozen, blood streaming from her nose, looking wild and unhinged. "He attacked me," she screamed, pointing at Julian. "He's crazy. He's my patient." A detective stepped forward. "Elena Vance?" "Yes, arrest him." "Actually, Ms. Vance, you're under arrest." Elena blinked. "What? Do you know who I am? I own this city." "You're under arrest for kidnapping, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder," the detective said, handcuffing her. "Mr. Blackwood's private investigator sent us the audio recording from the apartment. We heard everything." "Get rid of them. Gas leak." Julian stood up, breathing hard. He walked over to Sarah and Leo, shielding them. He looked at Elena as she was dragged away. "My name isn't Julian," he said calmly. "It's Mark, and you're fired." Elena screamed threats until the elevator doors closed, silencing her. The hallway went quiet. Julian turned to Sarah. He was bruised, his expensive shirt was torn, and he was bleeding. But he smiled, the real smile. "Did I miss dinner?" he asked softly. Sarah laughed through her tears. "You missed 5 years of dinner, Mark." "Then I have a lot of making up to do." 1 month later, the press conference was packed. Every news channel in the country was there. Julian Blackwood stood at the podium, but the nameplate didn't say Julian. It said Mark Miller Blackwood, CEO. He had legally reclaimed his name, but kept the company. After all, he was the one who built it into an empire, memory or not. "The rumors are true," he told the cameras. "I lived a double life, but not by choice." He looked to the side of the stage. Sarah was there, wearing a beautiful blue dress, holding Leo's hand. "I was lost for a long time. I had money, power, and influence, but I was poor." He paused, looking directly at the camera. "Real wealth isn't what you have in the bank. It's who is waiting for you when you get home." He walked off the stage, ignoring the reporters shouting questions about Elena's trial. He went straight to Sarah. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Where?" Sarah asked. "The penthouse?" "No," Mark said. "I bought something else, something better." They took the helicopter. Leo pressed his face against the glass, amazed. They landed not on a skyscraper, but on a large estate near the coast in Oregon. In the middle of the grounds stood a house. It wasn't a modern mansion. It was a replica, a massive, luxurious replica of their old cottage. But this one had a new roof, and a garden, and a tree house for Leo. "You built it?" Sarah asked, stunned. "I remembered," Mark said, kissing her hand. "The leaky roof, the porch where we drank coffee. I wanted to give it back to you." They walked to the front door. Mark picked up Leo. "What do you think, buddy? Is it okay?" "It's cool," Leo cheered. "Does it have the good ice cream?" Mark laughed. "The freezer is full of it. Cookie dough." They walked inside. It wasn't just a house. It was a home. Mark Miller had disappeared 5 years ago in the rain, but today, in the sun, he was finally back. And as he closed the door, shutting out the world of business and danger, he knew one thing for sure. He would never, ever let go of their hands again. Sometimes, love is the only compass that can guide us home, even when the mind forgets. Sarah never gave up, and because of her faith, a family was saved. If this story of hope, danger, and reunion touched your heart, please like the video. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about love that conquers all odds. And tell us in the comments, do you believe true love can survive memory loss? Thank you for watching. Until next time.